Okay, for this session, I'm going to do something just a little different. Rather than just give you some audio, you get to see me talk about the chemical process industry. The set of slides is very short because the types of things that you would do as a process technician for the chemical processing plant is going to be very similar to that we would do for the refinery. There are a few differences. So let's talk about some terms. There are some things called basic chemicals or commodity chemicals. Those are chemicals that are usually done in large quantities. Those are going to be, sometimes they're going to be intermediates, sometimes they're going to be final products. For example, let's take benzene. If I make benzene, it can be an intermediate in a process, such as if I'm trying to make a pharmaceutical called ibuprofen, I might have to have a starting material of benzene. But benzene may be a process, a final process, say at a refinery. I may actually produce benzene as a product. But benzene would be a commodity or basic chemical because it's produced in large quantities. It's used by multiple industries. It's used for a variety of different things, and I can use it for a variety of different products. This is a little different than a specialty chemical. A specialty chemical is going to be a very you may still have a large quantity of it, but it's going to be used for one or two different things. For example, let's say I'm making vanillin. I'm making vanilla. That would be more of a specialty chemical because I'm using it to make a very specific thing, and I'm not going to do it in the same types of quantities, say benzene. Now, vanillin is another interesting piece because vanillin comes from the vanilla bean, and that's a flavoring that we use. But I can also produce vanillin synthetically. I can take two basic building block chemicals, run it through a chemical reaction, and produce a molecule that looks exactly like the molecule that I would extract out of the vanilla bean. So I have a basic chemical, that's going to be our large quantity chemicals. I have commodity chemicals, which are sometimes referred to as basic chemicals because those are going to be our building blocks. I have synthetic chemicals, and vanillin can come from a natural source or it can come from a chemical process. And then I have specialty chemicals, which are very dedicated processes as well. Now, a refinery can also be a petrochemical complex. Let's take Borger, Texas, for example. At Borger, Texas, there's a natural gas processing plant, there's a refinery, and then there's a specialty chemical plant. So that's a petrochemical facility. There, the petrochemical facility will take the chemicals that are made from petroleum products. So I make those precursors, say over at the natural gas processing, I get things like heptane, hexane, very similar solvents, those commodity type chemicals, take them over to cross the fence into a different kind of a process and make specialty chemicals out of it. The Borger refinery does a lot of sulfur chemistry, so there's a lot of sulfur chemicals that are made as specialty chemicals. But those are petroleum-based chemicals, so those are called petrochemicals. So we have that kind of a definition. One of the differences that you might find at a chemical processing plant than you would say at a refinery is I might have batch processing. A refinery runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's a continuous process. We bring the crude oil in, the plant runs, those intermediates go from one process unit to the next process unit, and so forth. Now, I can do some chemical processes that way. I can run them continuously, but a lot of chemical processes are run in batch, which means that I'm going to add the ingredients to a reactor, let the reactor stir, maybe get to a certain temperature, maybe put in a catalyst, do something along the way to have a chemical reaction happen, and I will time that reaction for a period of time or until the reaction goes to completion. I shut down the process and then I take the chemicals out. So a batch process is a little different than a continuous process. So when you're going through your chapter, you're going to look at some of the history of the chemical processing. One interesting thing about the chemical processing was a lot of chemistry was done and chemical manufacturing was done in Germany prior to World War II, and World War II really spurred the chemical industry in the United States. So we have a lot of different things there. So you might look at that history a little bit. I also encourage you to go to the American Chemistry Council website to learn how the chemical industry interacts on a state-by-state basis, what kinds of things happen in chemical processing. Chemical processing has a number of different segments. We do the basic and the specialty chemicals. Those kind of seem obvious, but then there's paints, coatings, and adhesives. There's the pharmaceuticals and medicines. There are the agrochemicals, such as nitrogen and the fertilizer chemicals and all of those pesticides and herbicides. There's a big, huge agribusiness. Think about Monsanto. Monsanto at one point in time was a basic commodity chemical company. Now they're an agrochemical company. So you can really look at differences there. There are other types of different segments. You've got the pharmaceuticals. We talked about paints and coatings. We talked about agrochemicals. There's what's not mentioned in the chemical processing book is things like our polymer chemicals. Polypropylene, polyethylene, those are chemical type complexes as well. So look at the different segments. There are a variety of different chemical segments. Look at the American Chemistry Council so you can see some things that are happening there. One thing we haven't really talked about yet in both of these different aspects are the safety aspects of both of these industries. Safety is a key issue. It is not just an add-on to your job. It is something that you're really going to have to incorporate in your job, and it's something that you have to deal with every day. Not only are we dealing with large volumes of material, we're dealing with high temperatures and pressures. We're dealing with different hazards associated with the chemicals themselves. For example, crude oil is going to be volatile. It's going to be flammable. We could have fire. Fire would be a potential hazard. As we get into specialty chemicals and more of the petroleum chemicals, I may have other hazards. If we generate hydrogen sulfide, I may have an asphyxiation hazard. I may have hazards associated with the material itself. So look at those safety aspects as well. So for your homework this time, what you will have is reading the chapter, go through the slides. The slides aren't that detailed, and the job duties and the processing equipment are very, very similar than what you saw with the petroleum or the oil and gas industry. But I want you to go to that American Chemical Council or Chemistry Council page and really kind of look at the industry. Look at that infographic I gave you a link to. Look at what kinds of jobs are available. Because as a process technician, you may start at a refinery, but you may ultimately end up dealing with a chemical process. Because not all refineries are just based on producing gasoline. They actually, a lot of them have chemical processes in their facilities. So good luck, and contact me if you have any questions, and go from there.